Okay, so these are pieces of glassware and general lab equipment. Some of them we're going to come across in our lab work and some that we're not. So I'd like you to become familiar with a few of them. So you'll notice that some of these have different sizes. And so I'm just going to put a star or a circle. Maybe I'll put a box around the ones that I do want you to be prepared for on like a lab quiz. So this first one is called an Erlenmeyer Flask. A flask has this kind of tapered neck here. And so with that, you're able to kind of hold this neck and swirl it around. And it is graduated, which means you can measure liquids too, approximately on the side. So that's an Erlenmeyer flask. We're also going to need to know about beakers. Beakers are similar to Erlenmeyer flasks, they just don't taper up at the top. They also do give us approximate measurements, but they're not very good for accurate measurements. For accurate measurements, you will need to know the graduated cylinder, which I think most of you are familiar with. Lots more lines or graduations, and so that's why it's useful for measuring liquids. You should also know the burette. The burette is like a big graduated cylinder, but the difference is it has this right here, this valve. And instead of just pouring out the top right here, you would let it come out this tapered bottom, and you can have it come out in a steady stream or dropwise. So that's called a burette. We use these for titrations later on. Crucible and cover. Sometimes they're metal, sometimes they're porcelain, but it's for heating solids to a very, very high temperature. Something like glass is going to break at high temperatures. Evaporating dish. So let's say you've got just a little bit of a solution, maybe it's salt water and you just want the salt. You leave this here, either sit it out and let it truly evaporate, or you could put it on top of a hot plate and let the liquid evaporate off and you'd be left with your solid. A watch glass is similar to that. This is actually glass. It looks like a elephant contact lens, but you would use just a little bit. There would just be a little bit of liquid on there. There's much more liquid in evaporating dish. Stirring rod. If you need to stir something, you would use that. This right here, that's called the rubber policeman. It is indeed rubber. Generally, a stirring rod is either glass or plastic. In our lab, we usually use plastic just so it doesn't break as easily. Test tubes contain liquids and solids. They do come in various sizes. They're for small tests going on. We're not going to really worry about those there. Bunsen burner. Heat source attached to the gas here. Hot plate. So this is just plugged in, so you wouldn't have to worry about actual gas. Of course, the plug is not on top of the hot plate here. Let's see what else we need. Clay triangle. Supports a crucible, which we've already talked about in the last page. Test tube tongs. These are called holders. You can also call them tongs. Wire gauze. I don't think that's super important. Thermometer. I would hope this is pretty obvious. Ring stand and the O-ring. So this supports equipment and glassware. Sometimes I call this the O-ring. Okay, and let's see if I could change this. So this would be where you'd put like a beaker of water and you'd support that over a Bunsen burner flame. Plastic pipettes. Sometimes they're called barrel. Let's go back to that pink. Barrel pipettes, you'll need to know those. Mortar and pestle. The mortar is this, the pestle is this, to grind your solids. If you want a solid to be in a powder form. Crucible tongs, you should not be touching that crucible with your bare hands, just because, you know, it's super duper hot, and you would hold them in this fashion with the nose down. Scupula. Do not say it scoops, although it does. You're going to say it transfers solids. And that's it. So the ones that I did not put a box around, like desiccator, not important to what we're going to be using. But you should be familiar with most of these. And I would say especially the difference between a beaker, and a flask, and a grad cylinder. I've had a lot of students get those confused. So put a star or a circle or box, just like I did, in your notes, and make sure you're familiar with those. Okay, thank you.